Hello, welcome to the March 26, 2024 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the livestream today. If you have not attended a livestream before, how it works is you can ask questions in advance by sending an email to clubcubase@steinberg.de, or you could simply ask questions in the live chat field. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase you're running, so if it's version 11, 12, or 13, which level of Cubase, whether it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, and also which operating system. That information is often helpful. If you don't see an immediate response to your questions, realize that we can sometimes get behind in questions as we answer. I will go through and answer all the questions chronologically as they're asked. So if we could avoid repeating the same question over and over again, I would appreciate that. Just allows us to get through more questions quicker. If you wanted to search for questions that have been answered on previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com. And you want to thank Jan out of Stockholm for creating that website. He's actually going to a gig tonight and sent an email just to let us know he wouldn't be on. Very kind of him. But we want to give special thanks to Jan. We should have all of the topics that are discussed in today's live stream indexed and timestamped and pinned to the top of the comments field so that you could navigate and search quickly to find specific topics. And if you want to search through the nearly 32,000 topics, you could go to cubaseindex.com. We have two people that serve as moderators. They're volunteers. They don't work for Steinberg, but they just wanted to make it a better community experience. So we want to give special thanks to Agent K and Jazz Dude. Also, we'll give special thanks to Jazz Dude for his efforts with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord channel. So it's a wonderful resource of information that's available there to the Steinberg community. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'm the host today. I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching us live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us who you are. Just two quick notes before we begin. Just this morning, there's a special Steinberg promotion that has been announced. So it's 30% off of Cubase 13, Cubase 13 updates, I think even the educational version. Plus, there's a number of premium partner products. So even if you have Cubase 13, you can get like 5 or 6 different premium products. And I think Jazz Dude, I saw it already kind of posted a link free of charge. So that's a great incentive to update to Cubase 13 if you haven't done it yet. So 30% discount and partner products, and those will be going on for a little bit, but we just wanted to make sure you're aware of that. Also, Friday's live stream is the last live stream of the month, and in keeping with our customs, we will have a Zoom social meetup, and we will have a special guest this month. We do maybe about once every third session we'll have a special guest. So we're very fortunate to have Mr. Chuck Ainlay, who's an incredible recording engineer, has done over 300 records. He has 4 Grammys, I think 10 Academy of Country Music Awards, 2 CMA Awards, Country Music Association, 2 Tech Awards. He's worked with everyone in country music, but also if you with George Strait, Winona Judd, Reba McEntire, and other genres, Ann Wilson of Heart, Peter Frampton, Dire Straits, Mark Knopfler, Taylor Swift, other people. So, and we will have, if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'm happy to share that, but we'll share the link for the Zoom in the next live stream. This is something we do. It's kind of an exclusive for the community. So with that, we will go ahead and begin. I think there's one question that kind of rolled off before the chat started. So we'll get to that. So the first question: why do waveforms inside audio files disappear in a project window when zooming in and out? So there's a preference that could cause this. So we'll go ahead and take a look, and I think it's called quick zoom. So if you notice that when I zoom in, and we'll look at our audio waveform here, and I'll just make these larger as we zoom in, that we see the the audio waveform for the entire time as we are zooming in. Some older computers that had where the graphics weren't quite up, we could now go to editing, I think under zoom, and there is a function called quick zoom. So once that is enabled, as we zoom in, we notice that the waveforms disappear as we're zooming. So you could make sure that you don't have quick zoom turned on, and then when you release the zoom, it will go back. But this will prevent the zooming to occur while you're doing the zoom in. So if you want to see that, make sure that you don't have this preference. So again, go to your preferences under editing to zoom and disable quick zoom. So now when I zoom in, we can see the waveform the entire time as we're zooming. With that preference enabled, that would prevent the waveform from being displayed as we zoom in until we release. So check that preference there. Okay, so we see from Ben Loco says, oh my God, Steinberg is so generous, dropping all his freebies on Cubase 13 users. No better time to upgrade/update if you haven't. So it's a great point. All right, wonderful. See Taylor from Music for World Peace Records from Pine Grove, Pennsylvania. And his first question is, Cubase 12, I've tried automating the wah-wah and the VST amp rack. Both channel and plugin were in write mode. Automation displays graphically but has no effect on sound, and the pedal doesn't move. Any ideas why? All right, so let's see. I think I have a guitar part here. We'll put in a wah-wah on an acoustic guitar, so just kind of for demonstration. So I'm going to go to the VST amp rack. So I'm not sure if it's let me just reread. Okay, in the VST amp rack. So go here, distortion to the VST amp rack. I will go to amplifier. We'll say no amplifier, no cabinet. And let's get to our post effects. And let's add a wah-wah to it. So I'm going to just automate this particular plugin. So I'm going to enable write within the plugin itself. We're going to make sure that the wah-wah is turned on so that you see the light illuminated here, this little red light. And we will okay, so we hear the changes as we're doing the automation. And let's go ahead and just play back the automation. So we hear the changes and we see it changing visually. So let's say if I want to go back, and let's say if by any chance we didn't turn the plugin on, let's see if it still responds. So make sure, Taylor, that you have this the actual wah-wah turned on, like the power to the pedal, and you could automate those changes as well, as you just saw that I did. So if we wanted to just go back, make sure that the power is on for the pedal, and that, but you could kind of see and hear those particular changes right there. So let me know if that makes sense, or if you're doing anything differently than I just did. All right, next question. In earlier Hangout, someone asked how to see RMS on individual tracks, and it says, would having supervision on each track cause too much CPU usage? It could really depend on how many tracks that you're running, but a lot of times RMS could be more kind of dealing with how different sources are summed together as opposed to, individual tracks. So that's kind of why it's in the master section, but if you really needed to see it, you could place it on individual tracks, or you could have the track sidechain. You could set the sidechain input for different tracks within the particular supervision plugin as well. Let me clear my throat real quick. All right. Okay, also from Taylor, when stock drum sounds from Sound Browser are loaded into Groove Agent SE pads, do they contain velocity layers? So they may not contain velocity layers, so we'll just add a, but it may respond to velocity nonsense or regardless. So let's add an instrument track. And when we go to Groove Agent SE, so I'm going to find just a quick one-shot sample. Okay, so now when I drag this, I will, as we come here, so it's still going to play softer at lower velocities than higher velocities. So if I hit it very softly, so it can have up to 32 different samples that could switch. So if you wanted to have different samples at different velocity levels, but even a single sample will still play back and retain dynamics based on the sample engine of how you're triggering that particular sample. So it's just kind of the nature of how samplers will deal with different velocity. And I think you could even change that if you wanted it to be just a fixed velocity. You could do that. So if you want to set your velocity range, but it will respond dynamically even if it's just a single sample, and it's just kind of a function of the instrument itself. Okay, Music for Real Peace Records also asks, when using a Hallian sonic instrument to loop that has bass and drum grooves on one loop, how can I extract the bass separately from drums? So maybe if you could share if there's a particular preset that has that. So let me just see if I can find one quickly. Let me just see if we can find something that's like. All right, so let's say, let me load this one up, see if it's. Okay, so if I load this particular sound up, all right, so I'm just playing kind of one. So it could be like here you could say, okay, I want my hats to have different levels, and let's say the bass is one of the quick controls for the particular patch. You could adjust so this could give you a different volume level for the different components. So again, if we say I want the kick or the bass sound there to be quiet, we could adjust the level. So a lot of times if it's kind of like a multiple elements that make up the sounds, the quick controls will be programmed so that you could control those levels. So, but let me know if there's a specific preset in Halion Sonic that you're working with, and we could see if that works. Next question. Are there any plans to increase the size of the clip gain pencil tool nodes, or at least make them scalable? All right, so I guess if we are looking at this, so we have, all right, let me just make sure I'm reading it correct. Okay, so the clip gain pencil tool nodes, or make them scalable. So I guess that this would be, when we look at this, if we're drawing in, so I don't think that these are, scalable. So if we switch to our pencil tool, we could adjust these, and let's see if we could adjust multiple points. So this is ready to kind of carry over a concept that they used to have in Cubase VST called dynamic events before kind of automation was as robust. So I don't think that there's, if we wanted to scale this automation, so these points come before the fader, but if we really wanted to increase or decrease, we could still use that in conjunction with, so if I wanted all of these to be softer or louder, but still retain this particular dynamic curve, if we use that in conjunction with the volume, that they will both work together. So while you may not be able to take all these and notch them down like we do with automation, you can still have the same effect by increasing and decreasing the overall clip gain, and those changes will take effect. All right, Music for World Peace Records asks, I am unable to zoom vertically using Control Shift plus scroll wheel in Cubase 12. Is this a Cubase 13 feature, or is there a preference for this in Cubase 12? So when we're working with this, we could zoom in vertically using kind of the Control Shift plus the zoom wheel. So if I don't hold down the shift key, we go horizontally. So this was a new feature that was added in Cubase 13. So it's kind of, a lot of people had wanted it because it was the one missing kind of zoom factor that wasn't there from the mouse scroll wheel. So that's not in Cubase 12, but it is in Cubase 13. And so if you haven't updated, it's a good time to take advantage of the update because you get a 30% discount on it. Okay, we have a question from Patrick. If I want to print 10 existing tracks onto new audio tracks, I have to route the inputs of the new audio tracks manually. Is it possible to make a macro that does this automatically? So that's one way of doing it, but let's say I have like all these background vocals here. These are all background vocals, and if I wanted to print those, another thing that you could do is, let's come over here to render in place, and I'll go to my render settings, and we'll say I want to, all right, we'll say our channel settings, and then we could say mix down to one file, and we'll just call this background vox. So at this point, if we just wanted to do a render in place, and we could choose to do this with all of the different tracks that we want. So we'll just take this whole song, and we could apply all the different effects, all the automation, inserts, as well as sends. So now all of these background vocals have just been printed directly below the existing track. So if we just play.
There was no regret. Right after that Garth Brooks show.
So we could just come over here and, you know, print just that way. But if you wanted to do it a different way, so I want to print 10 existing tracks onto new audio tracks. To route the inputs and new audio tracks manually is impossible. So, but if we wanted to, you know, select a number of audio tracks, you know, so let's say we have our input. So we'll go to our studio menu to audio connections, and I wanted to change the inputs. Let's say we will add, I'll just come over here. Let's do, all right, so we'll call this input Patrick. So I will add a number of tracks. So 4 tracks, and we look at their inputs are currently set to talkback. So if I wanted to take these particular tracks, we go to our project logical editor, and we will choose to transform. And we'll say our container type is equal to track. We can add a further condition that the property of the track is set to it is selected. And for our event transform, so we want to take selected tracks, and let's get to our track operation, and we'll connect input, and we will just come over, say, okay, we want it to go to Patrick for my input. So right now we see that the input for all those tracks is talkback. So now that they're all selected, I could just come over and set the input on the particular tracks like that. So let me know if that'll help. But you know, if you wanted to just quickly bounce it down, we could just come over and, you know, set that, do a render in place as well without having to do any routing. Okay, so we have Uno Momento checking in from Finland. Great to see Spa Dogs from Canada. All right, so we have a question from Patrick. I have a feature request for MediaBay. I'd like to have the option to start the sample preview at the first 0 crossing point. Great for loops that have empty space in the beginning. So it may not actually, you know, a lot of times when you're looking at particular loops, it may not be, you know, it may not actually, like the first, we'll just take a look at some loops here just out of curiosity. All right, so the very first part of it may not be 0 crossing. So let me just, so, you know, there could be a lot of loops that don't necessarily have 0 crossing point as the very first. Like, you know, you may not have silence until, if we blow this up and zoom in. But, you know, you may not have any audio material until, you know, so you have 0 crossing at the silence of the loops. But you may not have any audio material until it actually passes the 0 crossing. So that may not be actually such a great criteria for different loops. So let's say if I want to take, we'll take a different loop here. know, so that may not be as kind of useful, especially when you kind of zoom in. Right, is that this probably sounds silent at the beginning, but you may not actually, it may not give you such a good, it may not work so practically because where it actually does the zero crossing may be several samples afterwards. So we see Patrick says additionally a longer than, shorter than filter for results would also be great to separate loops from one shots. So a lot of times you could actually come over and, you know, also within, if you're doing the metadata tagging. So, you know, a lot of times when we go to your metadata tag, so let's come over here, we'll say loops, you know, that we see when we get to drums, that if you're tagging beats as opposed to like kick, snare, hi-hat, that would give you an indication of, you know, particular ones that are drum beats versus individual samples as well. But I'll pass on the shorter than, less than. So, and again, you could have a cymbal crash that could be, you know, 16 seconds long. You could have a bass sample that goes 30 seconds long, so that could still be a single note. So sometimes, depending on your material, cymbal crashes, to get them to be authentic, may last for longer than a drum loop would. So just to capture the natural decay. Okay, Ecstasy Tunes asks, hi Greg, can you show us difference between audio record modes, replace, keep history, cycle, plus keep history? All right. Let's just do new. Okay, so I'll set up just a virtual instrument just so we could pass this as audio. Here, let me just. Okay, so I'm going to set up a quick audio track, and we'll set that as the input from Retrolog. Okay, so let's say I'll just record some initial data here. Okay, so now let's go to our audio record modes. So let's say we want to replace, so let's say we want to keep, so I'm going to play a different note on top here. Okay, so now that we've done that, we have kind of a C note and an E note. So as we go, we chose to keep the particular, to keep. So as we've done this, if I wanted to switch between the two recordings, I could just come right here, and we see these diagonal lines, and these diagonal lines indicate that there's audio material that is stacked. So we play this initially, All right, now in the middle, I'm going to switch it to the E note, and we'll go back to our original pitch. So when we have the mode set to keep, at this point, it's going to keep all the different files kind of stacked. And if we choose to replace the audio, that when we come over here, the audio that was underneath that we had kept previously is now moved and it's been replaced. So now if we switch to cycle, and we'll keep, and let me put this into a cycle mode. All right, so I'll just okay, so as we want to go through these different record modes that we have, cycle plus history, when we look at these, we could now have all the different recordings and we can make kind of a different compilation. So we could think of keep as keeping and stacking on top, cycle history plus replace. We could replace the existing recordings, and then replace is just we'll blow out the recordings underneath. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, so we have RFB checking in from the Netherlands. Thanks for joining us. And Mr. Dali 67 from Denmark. Wonderful to see Nick from Essex in the UK. I was listening to your track you shared on Facebook this morning, I think. Thanks for sharing that. All right. So we have a question. RFB says, is it possible to make a macro to open plugins? Can you show it? Thanks in advance. So I'm not sure if you want to open a specific plugin or a macro just to open all plugins on a specific track. So let me come and let's say I have I'll just add a track with a track preset. Here, I'll just drag one over. Okay, so I don't know of a way in a keyboard shortcut, but if you come to the edit key on the particular track, I think if you hold down so if you want to open up all plugins that are on the particular track, if you hold down Alt or Option plus Shift. So I haven't found a way to take this and turn it into something that could be triggered from a key command. I will ask for it again, but if this is what you want to do, is if we have multiple inserts here, that we could just open all of them like so. So I don't know of a macro to do it, but if you wanted to do that for the selected track, it's just Alt or Option plus the Shift key and then click on the Edit button. So, and that will open up all of the plugins that are on that particular track. So let me know if that's what you want to do, or if you want to open up insert slot 7 or open up the editor for send slot 3 or something. All right, Dallas LaRue asks, there's a way I saw one time that while recording a track, you forgot to hit the record button, you could go back and restore that recording. So if it's a MIDI track, so let's say now I'm just playing. I go, oh, that was the greatest thing ever. If we just come over here to retrospective record, that we can now input that for MIDI data. You can capture up to 10,000 steps. If it was an audio recording, there's a preference in Cubase where we could say preferences, and I believe it's going to be under recording audio, record audio, that you could set the audio pre-record seconds. So I think we could go up to 60 seconds. This could take up some of your RAM. But let's say I was recording. All right, and let me just get rid of this plugins. So let's say I was playing along and I missed a bit of an audio recording. So at this point, what I could do is simply go back. I could roll the start position of the audio recording back, and we could go up to 1 second backwards, or the value that's actually set in this preference right here, again under record audio, the audio pre-record. So if you missed a punch, you're like, oh, I just missed that punch, wish I had a little earlier for transition. By default, you could always kind of roll back audio recordings back a second, and MIDI obviously takes a lot less space. We could do up to 10,000 events that can be captured kind of in a pre-record retrospective recording fashion. Okay, my chat field just jumped. Okay. All right, Patrick asks, I have 700 plus orchestral template. What is the best way to only show specific sections of the template? Anything regarding visibility agents or custom macros? All right, so visibility agents, I think, are kind of the great way to do this. I'll do this on a much smaller scale, but you can get the idea. All right, so let's say I have winds here. I have winds, brass, and strings. So I want to make these. So let's say, okay, I want to take these particular strings, and we'll come over here to our configuration. We'll say add configuration. All right. So first I want to, before I add the configuration, I'm going to just go to my visibility agents, and I'll say show selected tracks. At this point, we'll add a configuration. I'll call it winds. Now I want to see my brass tracks here. Let's add a configuration, brass. And now we will just ask to show us all tracks. And you could also just kind of set it up here. So once I have these different configurations set up, I could just come over here and say, okay, I just want to see my winds. Now I just want to see my brass, and we can set up keyboard shortcuts for all of these as well, so that you can now just have your different track configurations so that you can navigate your project much faster and easier. And if you wanted to also just come over here, show all tracks, add a configuration for all tracks. So now we could just recall those via keyboard shortcuts or settings on like a touchscreen panel or MIDI controller of any kind. So let me know if that makes sense for you, Patrick. All right, so we see Mr. Dolly67 says it's just updated today. So congratulations, enjoy your Cubase 13. All right, Patrick asks, is it possible to save controller lane states with templates or use keyboard shortcuts to switch between different presets? So I believe that they will be recalled within a particular template. We'll give it a shot just to make sure. So let's create a new instrument track. And in the controller lane, I will have, let's say, breath control. All right, so we have breath control as our setup. So I want to come here and we'll save this as our template. Okay, so I'm going to switch this to velocity now, and let me start a new project, and we'll go to our template. And we can see that the breath control is automatically restored and retained within the particular template. So if we go back to our file here, we had switched the controller lane to velocity, so it's not just assuming that. If we wanted to add multiple, so let's say we want to add modulation, main volume, and let's say expression. We could now go to the controller lane setup. We could save it as a preset, and I believe that we could recall these presets if we if we want to go to organize presets, that we could have these presets organized in particular order. and that we could recall those with a MIDI keyboard shortcut. So we'll go to your edit menu to key commands. And under MIDI, you'll see controller lane setup 1. You recall up to 15 different ones with different keyboard shortcuts or remote control functions. But it looks like that the assigned MIDI CC values controller lanes will be stored within the template, but you can make presets as well. All right, always wonderful to see Brian Sawyer, senior from Beulahville, North Carolina, and Tiago checking in from Brazil. All right, so we see Taylor from Music for World Peace Records. I think I may not have had the wah-wah turned on at the time of automation. Thanks. It's nice when you're one mouse click away from happiness. But let me know if that works for you. Always fantastic to see Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas. And we have the Heartbreak Time Machine from California. Thanks for being on. Soren from Sweden says, fantastic vouchers to pick up today. Nice going, Steinberg. Okay, Patrick asks, can I load MediaBay samples into the project window at the cursor position by default when double-clicking a file gets inserted at this cycle position instead? Okay, so let me just give it a shot. So say my cursor here is at bar 2. Just let me change that. Okay, so say my cycle is on. All right, so I will. Okay, so it looks like it puts it at setting there. You do have options here when inserting. If you right click, that you can choose to insert at the cursor. So sorry about that. But you can right click and choose to insert into project at cursor position, and you could use a keyboard shortcut for that if you wanted to, as opposed to double clicking. So I don't think that there's a way to change that behavior, but you can, if you wanted to double click, we could do that, but you could also just kind of right click or use a keyboard shortcut to insert that at the cursor position. But I'll pass that along as maybe a preference for future. Thanks for bringing it to my attention. Always great to see John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin. Just says hello to Greg and the whole Cubase bunch. All right, Tiago asks for a feature request to rename several files automatically. I have several events with the description I want, but the file name is audio01, etc. I wish to rename the info and description to file name automatic. So if you're entering in, the tricky part is every audio file needs to have kind of a unique name. So anytime that we would have an audio file here, so if we had multiple files in our project and we renamed all these files at the same time, they would all have the same name. And then those wouldn't be kind of unique files that that Cubase needs, or any program needs to know when this file starts, because if these files have the same name, at that point, how does the program differentiate between the two audio files? So that's why you can rename, you can change the description on multiply selected files because the file name needs to be distinct. So, how would you differentiate? Naming multiple files at once would give them all the same name, and they need to have a unique name for it to be recognized in the program. Otherwise, the program would just simply, could reverse the audio files because they have the same name if they're named at the same time. So let me know if I'm misunderstanding, but that's why you could rename, change the description on multiple files, but the files itself has to have a unique name, and that's why the files are named in a singular fashion. All right, we have greetings from Japan. I wish I could read, I guess, the kanji, if that's the correct term. So we see from the Heartbreak Time Machine is just asking, there's a 30% discount on the 13 upgrade. So yes, as of today, it was announced that there will be there's a Cubase 13 promotion, and you could also get a suite of Premiere partner products as well, free of charge. And you can see those partner products just in your vouchers area of your My Steinberg account. Let's see, the Heartbreak Time Machine says so tempting. So yeah, it is good. All right, G. Mitch asks, when I vary audio track and drag the notes up or down, I do not hear them. A preference to change this? So let's go ahead and jump back. Okay, so usually there's two things that you want to make sure. One is that you have in your audio setup, and if you get to your audio connections, that you're utilizing the control room. So, and that your outputs are set to not connected. So right now, when I move this, I'm not going to hear it because there's the audition mode is automatically turned off. There's an acoustic feedback where we see this little speaker. So now that speaker, so when that is, make sure that is illuminated. And as we move up or down, if that isn't turned on, then you don't hear the changes. So make sure that this icon, the acoustic feedback, is enabled. All right, wonderful to see Daniela Tocan on. All right, wonderful to see Jason Sykes from South Shields, England. Glad you can make it. And Charles K., great to see you back. John Tyler asks, could you quickly explain how to save and back up sessions with audio files? Okay, so when we have the session itself, so when you start a new project, it's always great. You'll be prompted. So if you come over here and say, we'll create empty, you have this little prompt right here, and it's changed, I think, in version 11. It says prompt for project location. So we say create empty, and now we have we could set a particular project folder, and ideally you want the project folder to be unique for each song or project. So if you have that done, and there's another preference, if you use a lot of loops, that could be helpful. If you go to editing to audio, we could just say there's a preference here, copy all files to project folder. So if we do this now, as I drag loops in, they would automatically be placed at, from the original folder. If I drag this in, it's automatically now in the project folder for the project. So if that is set up, all I would have to do initially is just take our project folder that we defined and I could back that up. If I was sloppy about my project file management, if we go to your media menu, there's a little function here where you could say prepare archive. And what a prepare archive would do is move all of the files, audio files for the project into the project folder. And then you could copy that project folder to an external drive, upload it to a cloud service like Dropbox or OneDrive. Another method, if you wanted to clean up stuff very easily and archive your projects, is to go to your file menu and choose backup project. And what this will do is actually take your existing project, you're going to define a new separate folder, kind of in a folder with no files, so a brand new folder that's empty. And then at this point we could be asked if you want to minimize audio files, which would be if we had a 10-minute recording we used 5 seconds of, that it doesn't carry over the 9 minutes and 55 seconds that wasn't used. If we did direct offline processing, we can make those permanent. We could take files that weren't used in the project and we don't have to back those up. And we could choose not to back up the video files or the mixdown folder. So, and this would then make a backup, leaving your existing project as it is, but making a separate backup or archive of the project. All right, my chat field just jumped. Let me find my spot. Okay, great to see Grant Nicholas on. Great. Okay. A question from Mike Weiser. Is there a way to highlight any tracks and type in the volume for those tracks rather than using the fader? The fader, I'd like to set a default for all tracks at minus 8.31 in one shot, or maybe a key command. Okay, so let's say we'll come here to new project. Okay, so I'm going to select all these tracks here. Okay, so if I have all of the tracks selected, so I'm going to select all these tracks, and then there is a mode called Q-Link. So now that these are all going to be linked together. So, but if I put this, and there's two modes, so there's suspend all channel linking and there's absolute. So what I want to do now is come over and we'll say, so now you see that as I make a change on one of the files, I could change all of them. So I'm going to say minus, let me get the value, I think it was minus 8.31. Type it in, and now all of the selected tracks will go down to minus 8.31. So again, just make sure if you don't see it in the lower zone, and if we go to the channel mixer, we could see the Q-Link at top in the absolute right there. So again, let me just go to correct project. So when everything is at different values, again, Q-Link, absolute, just come here, type in your value, and all the tracks will then, absolute is basically they'll be absolutely the same as opposed to proportionality when that is turned off. So if I hold down Control or Command, or I'm sorry, Alt or Option, and we adjust these, if I type in a value, these would all go proportionally, but with absolute checked, they would all go to the absolute value that was entered in. So let me know if that helps, Mike. Always wonderful to see Michael Pierce from Grand Chapel Studios outside London. He's wishing that everyone is safe, well, and having a great week. He's lurking a bit today before dropping back into another session. All right, so we see the artist known as Love says, hello, everyone. Thank you for everything, Greg. So you're welcome. Always happy to be in the community. And artist known as Love wants everyone to hit the thumbs up like button. Carlo R has a question. How to change sample BPM to project BPM? How to slowing down or speed it up? Okay, so let's say I have a project here, and let's go to my drum loop. So let's say I have okay, so I drag this drum loop to a track. All right, so we're happy with that. So now when we play this back with our, and let's say my tempo is at 120 beats a minute, and we can see that this isn't really kind of lined up visually to the track. So what we could do with the metronome, rather, and we can see visually the two are independent. So if there is a BPM that's associated with a particular track, we can come over, select the event, and place it into musical mode. So now that it's in musical mode, we'll think of it like almost like a tempo parasite. So if I adjust my tempo, this is automatically speeding up and slowing down. So let's say I want that to be at 88. My tempo, let's say. So once you know what the tempo is of the original file, most loops will have this information. At that point, you just want to select musical mode right on the particular event, and then it's going to speed up and slow down to be in sync and in time with the project tempo. So, and I just noticed, going back to Patrick's question, so let's say my cursor is here, that if I just drag a track out, it goes to the cursor position automatically. So double clicking will place it, it looks like, at the left and right locator, but if you just drag it into the project, it goes to the cursor position. So that may be another method of doing it without having to right click and say insert at cursor position. All right, so we have Arcal773 checking in from Chicago. Says just upgraded Cubase Artist 13, couldn't pass up that discount. Congratulations, and we hope you love the new features and all the partner products as well. All right, we have a question from Ness. Hi, Greg. How can I put a plugin on a MIDI channel? When I go to the insert of the MIDI channel, I don't see any plugins. Can that be done any other way? Thanks. So, MIDI channels themselves, MIDI doesn't carry audio. So when we go to a MIDI track, just start fresh here. So when we go to a MIDI track, MIDI sends data out, and Cubase doesn't necessarily know where this data is going to. Is it going to a virtual instrument? Is it going to an external keyboard like a Yamaha Montage or a DX7? And that is generating the sound. So generally MIDI doesn't generate the sound. So when we go to inserts, we could see MIDI plugins, which can change the MIDI data. Now, if this MIDI track is going to a virtual instrument, what we could do is add our virtual instrument. So let's say we're in the rack and I want this going to Retrolog. Okay. So we can now assign this MIDI track to send out from, so this MIDI track will now send its data to Retrolog. So this MIDI track is now sending out to a virtual instrument. Now this is kind of within the realm of, so what we would do now is the MIDI track again doesn't have audio, but the virtual instrument track here of Retrolog does. So I could, as soon as I come over, let's say we arm, and I wanted to add an effect. So let's do like a flanger. It's going to be added not on the MIDI track, but the virtual instrument, the return channel. Now to simplify this, if you're working with virtual instruments, we would now we could just add an instrument track. And as we add an instrument track, we'll say we want this to go to Howling and Sonic. And I want this to go to Anima. So at this point, since we know that this is going into something that is inside of Cubase that has audio characteristics and not going out to a DX7 that's connected to a mixer, we could add our effects on instrument tracks. So this kind of simplifies it when using internal instruments. But again, the MIDI track doesn't have any sound. The sound source of, if you're sending it to a virtual instrument, we could do that. Or if you're sending it through an instrument track, you would just select the instrument track and add your effects and EQs and other plugins there. All right, DJ Ride asks, how do you tune a vocal to any key manually or automatically with same singing style? Like if you had a melody and want the vocal to fit. Okay. All right, I'll revert this. Okay, so if we have a chord track, so one of the things that we could do is, have a chord track. I'm just going to, okay, so let's say we have, so I'm going to select my guitar part and let's go to the project, and I'm going to say create chord events. And as we do this, it's automatically created a chord track for us based on the chords from the guitar. Okay. So we now know kind of what the key is of the song. So we can take any audio or MIDI event and have the chords automatically extracted. So if I go to my lead vocal and we go to Vary Audio, at this point there is a scale setting. So we can say that this is in the key of, and we could say use the chord track. So we're going to use that as the basis. And what I want to do now is quantize the pitches to the chord track. So the chord track was extracted from the audio, and now we could just quantize those particular notes. We could quantize the pitch of those notes to whatever key that you had extracted. So if you wanted to change the key, you could say, okay, you could actually come over here and say, I want it to be, instead of, A major, I wanted it to be an F sharp minor. You could, adjust the key manually if you need it to. And so, but that's how you could get the vocal to fit harmonically with existing parts. So once you figure out what the chords are, and again, we could take a whole track, a guitar part, MIDI parts, and if we go to your project, select the track. So I'm just going to do it from the guitar because that's where the chords are coming from. And we will create the chord events. And now that we go into our vocal, we can go to Vary Audio, edit the Vary Audio, set it to use the chord track, and then quantize pitches like that. So we see Gregory Malik says, yay, just upgraded Cubase 13 Pro and saved $30. I knew waiting would eventually bring us a sale. So, all right, so we have Trond says, hi everyone. He was number 30 to engage the like button, and he's sending greetings from Norway. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see from Sven Isaacson, says, once upon a long time ago, there was a feature in Cubase where a large fader would pop up instead of the small faders like the send faders. Is this still lurking somewhere, or is there any chance of us getting it back? I find the mini faders very fiddly to use. So I don't think that there's a large button for sending it to the different effects, and I don't remember in earlier versions it kind of being there, but I think it's like once we have, let's say we have our sends here, that I don't think it's terribly. So let's say if I wanted to add an effects channel here on slot 1, let's just add a bit of delay. So I don't think that this is too small a size to really kind of work with. But let's say if I want, so I think that's a fairly decent size to work with. Let's take a look at it in the mix console. So let's go to the mix console lower zone. That I think that is a pretty decent size to work with. It's not so small and fiddly to me. If we go to our large mixer and we'll go to our sends here that descend, and I think that we might be able, so say if we're sending this to our reverb, that's a pretty good size for grabbing the events, but I don't know of a way to have like a larger fader pop up. But I don't think that is like so small and fiddly to grab with. But let me know if yours looks different. But I think that's a pretty easy size, the height of it to work with. All right. All right, question. Will be the summer sale? When will be the summer sale for Cubase? I know that it's right now a 30% discount, but usually it was in the summer with 40% thanks. So generally, we don't announce our promotions in advance. So, if the promotions just kind of come, maybe like last week, I may have given a subtle hint that there was promotions coming this week. And I know that Soren picked up on it and put it on Facebook, which is fine. But generally, we don't say, we're having a promotion on this date in the summer. So promotions just kind of come and go. There's different promotions all the time that are going on. So, and you might have a summer sale, and maybe it's, if it was a different percentage off, you may not get free plugins with it. Who knows? So, but just a quick, but generally it's not announced in advance, so you could plan your calendars. So, all right, so we see Michael Pierce sneaking out for an hour. All right, we have Jav and Kona. Just is a little late, but I'm here, so you don't have to worry. There's no tardy slips, so there's no consequences of being late, other than you have to hit the like button immediately upon entering. All right, so we see Val says from Vienna. Says, dear Screech from Vienna, hope you have all downloaded the premium partner plugins already. So I got it on my personal computer. I think I have one or two other ones to get. Roland Stuff asks, hi Greg, what's the best way to adjust more than one part, like 2 or 3 voices in Audio Warp in the editor window, so you can switch between them and really see which part you're adjusting, please? Okay, so let's say I want it to come here. We'll take this phrase and I'll add a couple of harmony parts. So I can go to audio. And since we know what the chords are, we have this generate harmony voices. So just say, let's generate 2 harmony voices. Okay. So I'm going to now select these 3, hit the enter key, not on the numeric keypad, but on the normal computer. And then you could just simply switch between the different tracks right up here on the top. So we say this is the original file, and this is the vocal harmony that was generated for soprano, and this is for that. So we could again just kind of come over, and we could show only the active clip if you want it. So that was our lead vocal. This is a harmony. This was a second harmony. Or if you wanted to show all clips. So look at these 2 functions here. So again, the original, and you could just, and there's keyboard shortcuts to go to the next event right here if you wanted to, but you can navigate. And if you wanted to see them all visually together, we could turn that on and off right there. But again, to go into this mode, select the events, hit the enter key on the computer keyboard, and that will take you into the sample editor, and then you'll have your show active, show all clips, and which of the clips that you have as the clip of focus. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, so we just see Jav and Kona just says, wow, what plugins? So with the 30% off promotion, there's a series of partner products. So you get free plugins from different third-party companies. So if you're a Cubase 13 user, you have access to all of those. Okay. All right, wonderful to see Matt Elston on. Just saying hi to everyone in the awesome Cubase community. Very grateful for everyone for these fantastic resources. Thank you. Thanks for being a member and being so loyal. We appreciate your loyalty in attending the live streams. All right, Val has a question. Is there a compressor in Cubase I can trigger the sidechain with a MIDI track? So you could take the output of a MIDI track. So let's come over. Let's see if I have this in my recent projects. Let's open it up quickly. Okay, so what I want to do is I'm going to add a groove agent here. All right, I'm going to take this kick drum sample and let's put this onto pad C1. Okay, so I'm going to just create MIDI events from this. Okay, so we will come here, let's put this onto C1. Okay, so I'll mute this and should. All right, so we have the output here. So what we want to do is, since this is, so it's not necessarily from a MIDI track, but what you can for the compressor, but we can take the output of this. So let's go to my groove agent. So I want to put a compressor on this track. I think I may have one on already. So we'll go to the compressor here. And let's go to the sidechain setup. And here we want it to go to the audio out of Groove Agent SE. So I think that this is. So now every time that Groove Agent fires off a note, and I'll just erase this just in case anyone thinks that is what's doing the triggering. So as we look at so the audio output of the virtual instrument is tracking that. Now there is a different kind of gate that could be driven by MIDI as well. So if I wanted to come here on this particular track, I'll bypass the compressor. And if we go to dynamics, there is a MIDI gate. And what this would allow us to do is, as we play a MIDI note, that we could have, let me see if my, and we could basically just add a MIDI track, not the right track, I'll just add a MIDI track, and we will set this track to go out to the MIDI gate. So once that's added, so you could just send it, let me just, all right, let me just make sure I have the plugin. Okay. Okay, so the MIDI gate right there. So now that this will form as a, as soon as I play MIDI notes, that gate will open. It's not necessarily a compressor, but so you could trigger the output, you know, so the MIDI gate, once you're here, we could, again, just kind of take this particular, and as I hit any MIDI note, and if you wanted that to be note off messages, you could and if you wanted to adjust the attack and release. So if I just quickly release the note, we could have the release kind of hang out longer. So, but that's something you do, but then you could take the audio output and run that as the sidechain input for compressor as well. So let me know if that helps, Val, with what you want to accomplish. Okay, so we see a question from Ahmed Ali. In Cubase 13, the automation lanes go red and do not gray out once my automation move is over. Okay, so let's say we have automation going on here, and I'll just go to the volume automation, and let's say I have it in touch mode. So as soon as I come here, I will go ahead and write the automation on the track. That would help. So now it goes red and I let go. And now it could be that your automation mode is not set to touch mode. So let's undo that, and let's say if I have it set to auto latch, and what auto latch will do is it'll maintain the value until you hit stop on the transport. So if I come here and I make my adjustments, the red will stay until I hit stop because it's in auto latch. So, but if it's in touch mode, then it should, as soon as I stop touching the fader, I release the fader, release my finger from the mouse. Now it's automatically will stop writing the automation and will only see red when it's being written. So make sure if you want that behavior that you're in touch mode and not auto latch or crossover. All right, so we see from John Tyler, thank you for the answer. Archive project command is exactly what I needed. Thanks from Milwaukee. All right, well, you're not too far from John Costigan in Kenosha. So we'll have our Wisconsin, our sconsies on the live stream today. All right, so we have Sven Gearson. Hello from Iceland. Thank you for joining us from Iceland. Always wanted to go there. Question: say I want to export multiple wave tracks, as MP3. I want to export multiple wave tracks as MP3, and they are not the same length. Is it possible to export multiple tracks in their own length? So if we have a number, let's do new project. Okay, so I want to export these events as MP3, but they're not the same length. Is it possible to export multiple tracks in their own length? So I'm not sure if it's more like a stems or if you want it like these particular files. So there is if you go to export, let's see, if we go to file menu to export, there was a not selected tracks. Sorry, let me just. Let me just check something here real quick. So I'm not sure if they're on different tracks. All right, so go to your file menu to export selected events, and let's see if we could change the file type. All right, so that's not going to do our export. All right, but if we just go to, and let me just, so export multiple wave tracks as MP3 and they're not the same length. All right, so let's say if it is more of a situation like this, and let's say these are all slightly different lengths here, that if we do a export audio mix down, we will select multiple. I could select all of my different channels and export it as an MPEG-1 layer 3. That as we work with this, that all of these will now be exported to an MP3 file. I'll just save it on to my desktop for now. All right, so I'll export all these down. Okay, so we can see that these have all kind of been done. These will now, even though they were different lengths, they will be exported based on the actual length of the left and right locators. So, and I had these automatically imported directly into the project. And if we go to, let's say, your Finder or Explorer, if we go to desktop, we'll say our MP3 multi-export, that all the individual files are there as an MP3, but it will, the length will be determined by the left and right locators. So let me know if that is applicable for what you want to do. And thanks for joining us. Okay, and I just see, so not according to locators. Okay. Okay, so if we want it to not be based on the locator length, so we could do not as MP3s, but we could do the export as selected events. And then, but this won't allow us to change it to MP3. We'd have to convert the MP3s separately. So, let me know if it's crucial that it needs to be converted to an MP3, because if we go to File and we do Export Selected Events, it's not going to automatically. So let's see if we can. I'll do New Project, and I'm going to take all those files. Let me just see if we can do a two-step process. So let's get to our desktop, and where we had our MP3 multi-export. All right, and now I want to import my audio files. And I know this will be the same length on these, but I just want to. So it might have to be a two-step process, because now it's converting the files from MP3 to WAV so that we could edit. But let me just see if we do this, and in the pool window, if we could convert it. So it looks like we could do it as a FLAC file. So we could do it as a FLAC file. So let me know if it's like really crucial that it be an MP3 file, because you could do different lengths by selecting all the events and going to Export Selected Events, but that won't convert it to an MP3. But there's a number of different ways to convert it to MP3s afterwards. So, or if a FLAC file would do it, because then you could do that as a two-step process and take all those files and convert it to a FLAC file, which is, if you're doing it for file size, would kind of give you the same benefits, but it's not an MP3, it's a lossless audio compression. So, all right, wonderful to see Peter from Montreal on. DJ Ride asks, is there going to be a Groove Agent 6? So I'm sure that the team is always working on new versions of things. All right, DJ Ride asks, is there a way of auditioning sounds in Halion without having to double click to load each sound? So let's take a look at Halion and Halion Sonic. All right, So we'll start with Hallian. So I'll add an instrument track. All right, so let's say we're going for a single instrument, and I want to audition different ones in FM Lab. So I think that once I load one up, all right, let me try a different approach, like from MediaBay. Hang on just 1 second. So let's go over here to my VST Instruments, Hallian 7, and go to FM Lab. So now as I click here, so I don't have to double click the load. I could just come select the sound and audition right there. And you could just hit the arrow key. So let me know if that makes sense for your workflow. And it'd be the same for Hallian Sonic as well. All right. All right, so we see from Vincenzo Lamelli, split a groove agent loop to part audio track. All right, so let's say if I have a groove agent, so let's say if we want to take an instrument track here, and let's say we have groove agent. Navigate home, we'll just load up some loops. All right, so now let's say if I have my loop here, split a groove agent loop to part audio track. Okay, so if I want to come, I could say let's slice this audio. And now once we create slices, each of these slices can be split up. And at this point, it creates a pattern pad for us. So I could just take this particular pattern pad and be able to kind of move it around as I see fit and be able to edit it in the MIDI domain. So if we wanted this to kind of play back, we could but let me know. And then if you wanted to randomize those particular notes, I could just come over here and take each of those slices and or we could use like a logical editor to so you could kind of change things up. So let me know if that's kind of what you want to do or if it's a different approach. I'd be happy to show you. All right, so we have a question from Tony Trunzo. Hi, Greg. In Library Manager, I moved all the files to an external hard drive and reinstalled Cubase 13. How do I get Cubase to see all the instruments from the external drive? All right, so let's go to your Library Manager. So we'll come over here, open up the Library Manager utility. And if you go to Settings here, you'll just see Library Default Location. So again, click on the Settings icon in the upper right-hand corner, and then just choose this path. Select the path where the content is on your external drive. So again, open up the Library Manager, go to Settings, and then come right over here, and you'll be able to set the default location for it to look for all of your content. All right, so we have so I saw from Moski Marketing or Mashi Marketing saying, is it worth to upgrade from Cubase 10.5 to 13? So I definitely think so. There's, a wonder of new features in Cubase 11, a whole suite of amazing enhancements in Cubase 12 and Cubase 13. Plus, you get, as mentioned in some other comments, so, there's a lot of significant changes. So I think for Cubase 11 and Cubase 12 and Cubase 13, there's like 3 roughly 2-hour videos of each of the changes in each of those generations. So if you wanted to watch those, then you'd be in good shape. All right, RCal773 says, Greg, can you give an example of how to use Melodyne 5 Essentials in Cubase? So I don't have Melodyne on this computer. I'll probably get it with the promotion. I'm eligible. But all you would need to do is, it's going to run as an ARA extension. So what you would want to do is to select the track that you want to do it on, and come over where you see no extensions, and you'll see Melodyne show up right there, and then I'll just run it in spectral layers. So now when I double click on an event on that particular track, what's going to happen is Melodyne will launch in this lower window like we see with spectral layers launching in this particular window. So again, you want to run it as an ARA2 extension. So as we work with that, you want to just see, when you go right here, we can just see under the extensions, you'll see Melodyne listed there. All right, so we see, Greg, I have Cubase 10.5. Is it really worth to move to 13? Can you show here the best new features like top 5? I've read it all, but I'd like to see in practical manners which really has improved. So realize that each version probably has 200 new features. There's probably like 600-ish new features. So one of the big themes in Cubase 12, there's no more USB-E licenser is not required. And you could have Cubase authorized on up to 3 separate computers. I think that the user interface has grown significantly as well. So we now have kind of like your entire inspector for all audio characteristics that's going to be included here. It's going to be optimized for all the latest generation processors. So if you have hybrid CPUs that have performance and efficiency cores, Cubase will be optimized for all of those different functions. You will have a lot of additional instruments. You're going to have, on the instrument side, you get Halion Sonic 7. You're going to have additional groove agent kits. You'll have a full orchestral instrument with Iconica Sketch There are a load of new plugins. So some of the new plugins, if we're to look at, and that just came in 13, you'll have Pultec style EQs, amazing like dynamics plugins like black valve compressor. So if you want like a tube compressor, if you want a very specific Vox comp, and if you do vocals, this is kind of a no-brainer. You could actually come over here and have Vocal Chain, which will give you 18 different processes in one particular plugin optimized for vocals. There are, as we had shown before in Very Audio, there's new scales. So you could say, I'm in the key of A, quantize the scales. If we are doing lots of MIDI editing, the new MIDI environment where we could easily select multiple tracks and from within the editor is, if you're doing large orchestral and scoring projects, really essential. I think having also the exporting options. So when we go to your export cues, we could set up different scenarios, and we have different batch exporting with different effects handling. So where a lot of film composers had assistants that would just sit there and render files into different formats for different people, these could all be saved as presets. So, each one of the versions has, again, if you want to watch those, but if you let me know, say, hey, I do rock music, I do like EDM, I do this type of work, I could even kind of focus it a bit more for what particular workflows that you want to experience. DJ Ride asks, let me clear my throat. Sorry, need a drink of water, but then I'll have to stop for a biological break. All right. So DJ Ride, is there a way of organizing your favorite plugins when searching to put them on an insert? Thanks for answering my questions. So if we go to your studio menu to VST Plugin Manager, we could see kind of all of your audio plugins, and we could choose to make a new collection. So we can make a new empty collection, or we could say copy the current collection. So we'll come here, we'll call this collection DJ Ride. Okay, and my DJ Ride can actually say, I don't use this plugin, and I could just get rid of these, and I could add folders and say super faves, whatever you want to call it. And you could put your own plugins and organize them as you see fit, but then you could just see all sorts of different plugin collections that could be seen right from there. So this allows you to organize your own folders, your own plugins, and they can be done independently for VST Instruments or VST Effect plugins. And also from Mosky Marketing, if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'd be happy to send you links of what's new in Cubase 11. You also get Spectral Layers 1. So if you wanted to take a recording and extract the vocals and do spectral audio editing, that also came in version 11. So you could actually kind of take the vocals out of a recording. All right, so we have a question, excuse me, from Carlo R. What exactly is LUFS and how to use it? So LUFS is a loudness standard. So it used to be that we would have two different audio metering standards for loudness. So one, and based on decibels or dB, is one would be RMS, which is kind of the average loudness, and peak loudness, which would measure kind of the very loud parts of the audio file. So it's gotten to the point, and we see this, it isn't as much of a problem as it was in years past, but there's, often there was an abuse of loudness standards for broadcasting, where the commercials would be much louder than the broadcast material. And it got to the point where it annoyed enough people in the United States and other countries where the broadcasting commissions of different countries needed to come up with a standard, because some people were using RMS for the programs and peak for commercials. So they didn't want to have to adjust the volume all the time every time a commercial came on. So a new loudness standard was created by the European Broadcast Union, the EBU, and it's called the EBU R128. So what this is a standardized method of having one consistent volume level. So let's say as we're playing, we can go to our meter and we could switch to our loudness units now. So a lot of time when people are mixing for a streaming service, many of the streaming services will want you to deliver the loudness at minus 14 LUFS, or loudness unit full scale. So it's an acronym. So as we do that, if your music exceeds minus 14 LUFS, it could be compressed and changed on the streaming service. So if it's too loud, it will be compressed down. If it's too soft, it may be expanded upwards. So people want to be able to control the different loudness levels so that their mix is optimized for different delivery formats, such as Spotify or Amazon or iTunes or YouTube. So then they could have evolving slightly different standards, but this allows us to have a baseline measurement so that we know that no additional processing on your mix is going to be employed to make it optimized for those particular streaming services playback engine. So again, it's just a loudness units for volume. So again, the acronym is for loudness units full scale. All right, so we see Carlo R says, just saying he's a previous FL Studio user and a little bit of Ableton, but now I'm happy to work in Cubase. Excellent DAW. We're happy to have you on, and thanks for joining the live streams. All right, so we see Val just says, thanks for your answer, Greg. Unfortunately, that didn't help. I wanted to have the compressor react when I trigger it via MIDI. That's not heard, but maybe I will have to use a third-party compressor. So I think, if you wanted to, let me see if I still have this open. But even though the compressor is heard, all right, so in this example, all right, let me just... Okay, so let's say we have our MIDI track here, and the MIDI track is, again, feeding the sidechain input of this. So I'll come here, let's go to my compressor. Okay, so open this up, and the sidechain is set to Groove Agent. Okay, so let's say, so if I don't want that compressor to be heard, I could take this track and just route it to no bus. So your MIDI can still trigger the sound, but the output of the instrument or the output of the MIDI source doesn't have to be heard. So it could still trigger the sidechain without being heard. So let me know if that makes sense or if that's helpful at all to you, Val. All right, it's wonderful to see Diamond District Studios from Cape Town in South Africa. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see Carlo R. just says, for me, Cubase is the best. Okay, so Ahmed Ali says, thank you, Greg. We'll update if the problem still persists. Yeah, just let us know. I think that's with the automations staying on. Roland Stuff asks, thanks for explaining how to vary audio several vocal tracks together in the editor window, Greg. I guess the same works for adjusting with audio warp. I'm not in front of my studio PC at the moment. So yeah, you could do that for audio warp as well. So if I wanted to take these two sources, and I'll just change the color on one of them, make it more obvious. But again, if I select like my synth bass, it's kind of very erratic or very stable with my kick, and I hit the enter key. And again, I will close this, that we could choose to, so as we look at this, that we could see both the clips, and then we could pick and choose which one is the active. So we can see kind of the synth bass in the back, and we can see the kick tracks on top of it. Sorry for the noise above me. I think we have some new chairs that might have come, so probably my son is helping assemble them for my wife while he's on spring break. Okay, so we see Fourth Co-Consulting, or Fourth Company. It says, I love how Iconica Sketch came with Cubase Elements 13. So yeah, it's a wonderful orchestral library. Okay, we see also another point, definitely wonder why my V Collection synths, the MIDI maps, work so well in Ableton, but not Cubase, but these vouchers lately are lovely. So, but let me know, like, what you mean by the MIDI maps. Because a lot of times it could be doing quick controls inside of Cubase, or but you should be able to, easily control everything. So, but check out that you're using, the 8 top parameters of your instrument will just show up as quick controls as reported by the instrument itself. And then you could quickly have those assigned, and you could easily change those particular elements if you wanted to customize the instrument. So if you want to customize what 8 parameters are assigned, you can come right over here to your QC, click on L, and then you could have 8 defined parameters. If you click on L, move their parameter, that will assign it to that quick control slot for the plugin every time you use it in the future. All right, so we have Structured DMB. Says, hi from the UK, trying to figure Cubase, trying out Cubase 13 demo. I'm a beginner. How do I clone a sound? So if we have a particular sound here, so I'm not sure what cloning is. If you wanted to copy it, if we go to, you could hit Control or Command plus the letter D, and that would duplicate. You could also, if you grab kind of the right edge in the center, we could just duplicate like that. Also, if you wanted to duplicate the track, so if you want it on different tracks, you could right click on the track here and choose duplicate, and then that would simply duplicate the particular track right below. And if these are set as parts. So let's say before I duplicate that, I have this set as, we go to the audio menu and we say events to part, that now when I duplicate the track, we could have these set. Here, I'll just add an audio track below. And if I hold down Command plus Shift, or I'm sorry, Alt or Option plus Shift, now these can be linked if they're parts. So if I want to come over here and double click on one event, I could just do like a fade in on the different events here, and whatever change I make on one can automatically be applied to the other file. So if that's what cloning is to you, depending on your terminology, we can set that up. And if you wanted to split and say, okay, I want this to be really soft in both events, this way we could clone, and I changed the length on them, but we could do that quite easily and have those changes. And let's see, the second question, how to turn off snap into place. I want to move beats around. So snap, like right now we have this set to, you may have it set to bar beat quantize, but snap is right here, and you could hit the letter J. So J will turn the snap on and off. So right now, if I'm moving the start of this event and I have it set to snap to bar, I'll just go ahead and let me cut this so we can make it a little easier to see visually. So right now, as I have snap, so J, the letter J on a computer keyboard, so now I could only snap to the bar, but if snap is turned off, I can freely move events around. And if I wanted snap to go to beat instead, I can now just have that snap to the beat or to the quantized value. So let's say I want this to snap to the quantized value or 16th note. And there's also an adapt to zoom. So if I'm kind of zoomed out here, we could have it snap to the bar. If we zoom in a little further, I could say, now I could snap to quarter notes. And if I zoom in further than that, we could do eighth notes and 16th notes, depending upon the zoom level. So again, to turn snap on or off, you could just hit J. And you could also, if you hold down like Alt or Option plus Control Command, you could slip kind of audio within events as well. So let me know if that's helpful for you. And thanks for trying out the Cubase trial version. We're here every Tuesday and Friday just answering questions. So we hope to see you on future live streams. All right, so Eric B says, Greg, sorry for my earlier questions. It was wrong. The meaning was, question, is there a macro that opens VSTi plugin, or is it possible to make that macro? So there is a key command for edit VST Instrument. So if you go to your key commands here, so let's say I'll add an instrument track. So let's say I'll add a backbone here since we don't have that in. Okay, so if you want it to have, it doesn't have to be a macro, but you could come over to your key commands. And if you just search for edit VST Instrument, So I think I assigned this one myself, but that's the command. So if you don't have the instrument, I can just kind of come over here and where I have that particular instrument loaded up, I could just say, okay, I want this, and we could open up the instrument. I want it to go to this track and hit that keyboard shortcut. We could open and close with the same keyboard shortcut. And if you wanted to create that in the MIDI remote as well, go over here. Let's say I want this button to edit the VST instrument. And you could even probably just right click here and say pick up for MIDI remote mapping and apply. So now every time I push that button on a track that has a VST instrument, that track itself will just open up for you. So let me know if that makes sense, or if I'm still misunderstanding, Eric. Thanks for the clarification. All right, so we have a question. I have 10.5 with dongle. If I upgrade to 13, it still can be registered through dongle or different right now. So when you go up to Cubase 13, it's going to take your Cubase 10.5 license, upgrade it to version 11 on the E-licenser. So you could run 11 and earlier on the USB E-licenser. Cubase 12 and Cubase 13 are running a new licensing system called Steinberg licensing, and that's more of an account-based system that doesn't require the dongle. You could still run your 11 and 10.5 using your USB E-licenser. Cubase 13 and Cubase 12 will not require it, but you can still use it to run earlier versions. So you see Mark Chiambo says he had the same issue of exporting events to MP3, uses a workaround to cycle markers, and then export using the audio mixdown window. I'd hoped that the export selected events would get updated to export to MP3. So yeah, I'll mention that. So I didn't know if the original question, if they were all on the same track or not. So if they're all on different tracks, you could use like a cycle mode. And if you're not familiar with that, we'll show that. So if we add, we'll just make a marker track. And then we could, I'll just, and you can make macros to kind of do this, but if you want it to come so if it's all on and then once we have markers set, so if they're on the same track, we could now go to our export audio mixdown and then base it on cycle markers. And then export it as MP3s, but I wasn't sure if they're on different tracks or on the same track. So if they're on the same track, you could do the cycle. So you could do that. Thanks for mentioning that, Mark. Okay. looking through comments here. Okay, we have a question from Ed Rugman. Is there a way of compressing or expanding a set of MIDI CC values in the Project Logical Editor like you can with the mouse box around a selection of points? I'm thinking of having MIDI remote buttons. Okay, so let me just... just add an instrument track. Okay, so say we have a couple notes, and when we look at this in the editor, so I think what Ed wants to do, we'll see if we can get this sorted out, is to take our modulation controls like this, and within the editor we can kind of compress or expand like this. I think what Ed wants to do is to trigger that from kind of a MIDI logical editor. So let's see if we could do that. So we're going to say type is equal to controller, and let's say in this instance MIDI controller is going to be, let's say our subtype is going to be equal to controller 1, and we want to take the main valve value All right, so say if we want to do 40 to 100, let's just see. Okay, so just make sure I have this set right. So, all right, so now we can add our values. Okay, so let's say we want to multiply by 1.1. Okay, so we get increase or decrease. Let's see what we do. So you might be able to use like the round by factor. So let's say if we're here, so I don't think it will get you the exact thing. I mean, we could set it to random values between, so let's say we wanted between 40 and 100. That we could do that, but it's not necessarily kind of compressing it. Let's try relative random values. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be quite the same. Let me just try the linear changes in the loop range. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be kind of an equivalent way of doing it. I could play with it some more, Ed, if you want to email me. I'd be happy to kind of dive into it a little more, see if I could mimic that behavior for you. All right, so we see from Fernando Matias. Hi, Greg. Does Cubase apply anti-aliasing filters when exporting down-sampled audio, for example, when exporting 44.1 waves from a 48K project? Thanks. Got Cubase 13 today and spectral layers recently, so I'm happy. Congratulations. So if you apply dithering, so there is a dithering plugin. So if we go to your mix console, a lot of people do it and don't really hear any consequences of it, but probably what you could do is just come over, and once you go under tools, it's going to be the Lin 1 dither. So go to the Lin dither, and this will allow you to handle the different, so when you're going to changing your output bit depth, or so this would allow you to, set up the dithering for that. So if you use the dithering, it's generally good to run it as the last phase in the exported, in the, post fader. So, but yeah, just employ the Lin 1 dither. All right, great to see Avri checking in from Tel Aviv. Hope you're well. And he just says Cubase 13 is amazing. So yeah, it's a wonderful version. All right, so we see RCal773 who asked about the Melodyne. Says, thanks, Greg. I'm excited to work with extensions. Yeah, so the extensions are really good at allowing you to kind of take you and integrate you into a different editing environment that sometimes when you're working with plugins, it doesn't really give you the depth of the editing capabilities, but the extensions allow you to basically almost run a different program within Cubase. All right, Everett Neal asks, how can you record vocal audio to MIDI tracks without hearing the music in the audio track when listening? So generally when you record the vocal, the audio is not going to be recorded to a MIDI track, but it's going to be recorded to an audio track. If you wanted to convert the vocal recording into audio, what you could do is come over within Very Audio. So we'll open up this project here. I'll take my lead vocal. And as we go into our Very Audio tab, click here, and then we could extract MIDI. And now we could have the MIDI information spread out for us here. But generally, generally it's the vocal is going to be recorded to an audio track, and MIDI and virtual instruments will be recorded to MIDI. All right, Influential Gaming says, remaining as a standalone, offline, fully owned program is vital. Cubase is wise to stand for this model. I never really liked leasing instruments or gear. I always liked owning it. So I didn't, especially with software, I don't necessarily want, if I change my credit card to have a session go down because the company has my old credit card or something like that. All right, Everett Neal asks, how do you export your finished project to YouTube, SoundCloud, etc.? Also, how can I transfer to a file on my mobile phone? So, each of those services will probably take a WAV file. Most of them will take like a 24-bit 48K file. I believe it's going to be kind of standard. So all you'd have to do is take your project and export audio mix down. And at this point, we would choose for it to be a single file. We would take the stereo mix, and then we could choose where we want this particular file to be saved to on our system. So just pick a folder. You could choose if you want it to be an MP3 file, you could export it as that. Most times when you're going to be doing this as a critical stage, I would give a full resolution audio file because it may get altered. And sending an MP3 file and having that altered could be detrimental to the sound quality if that's important to you. But then once you have this WAV file, you could upload that WAV file to the various services for delivery or email it to your phone. All right, so I see Jazz Dude may have found a particular, maybe like a MetaGrid function for doing the controller, so I'll check it out after the live stream. Thank you, Jazz Dude, for passing that along. All right, question from Witty Music. How can I make the track name the same as the bounce MIDI or audio? I had to separately go and rename the track after a bounce. It's so crazy that Cubase doesn't name it automatically. All right. Okay, so I'm not sure how you're bouncing. So let's say I want to take this file and do a render in place on it. So I want to render this. So if I go to my render in place and we go to our render settings, here we could choose to say, okay, I want this my channel and I want to use a custom name. So as I come here, we're going to call this Witty Music. All right, so I'm going to render. And now we have this file. All right, so the track isn't named, so I think okay, because let me see if we rendered the actual event or the track. Let me just check, make sure I didn't have the track selected. I think I just had the event. Okay, so it's going to carry that over. But let's say if I come here, let's go to export audio mix down. And I want it so let's call this Whisper Vox. Okay, so okay, so I want that. So let's go ahead and export, and I will just include it. I'll create an audio track. All right, and when we do that, so say I do my export, we have naming conventions. So I could say I want all right. So let's say name. All right, so it could depend if you're exporting the event or the track. So let me know. All right, so all right, so I'm going to try selecting the track here. And let's get to the render in place. And now I have the track selected. I may have different options. see. All right, because it's actually just doing it based on the track name. So I think it could depend on, and I think that there are some preferences where the track name is automatically, the event names can follow the track names. To see if I can find his preference. There's the parts get track names, but I guess you want to do the track to be named after the event. So let me know if you're doing a render in place or doing a mix down of that. I'll see if I can play around with it more for Friday's live stream. All right, Alex Morgan asks, hi Greg, is there a project logical editor setting to remove all numbers from a track name? Okay, so let's see if we can make one. Maybe one already. Let's go. Okay, so let's say we're going to transform. We'll say our container type is equal to track, and we'll say name. All right, so say all right, so we have FX2 started delay, so let's see. Okay. Okay, so let's come here. We'll say name. All right, so let's create a new project here. Okay, so now I'm going to say and I think we could just kind of do this for 0 through 9. So we'll say name, replace search string 0, and I'll do, so now I come here. Yeah, so now we'll come over and just say name, replace search string 4. And let's see if I have an audio track, and I'll call this audio track 11. Let's see if that will work. So it looks like you could just kind of set up different numbers. So, and if you want, I could just continue to kind of make this and save it as a preset, but I'll just save this. Then I'll expand it some. And if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'd be happy to pass it along. So even if we just come here, yeah, so if you run it multiple times, if you have 11, 33, you could just kind of run this a couple of times, and then you could just replace it. If you have 1,000 tracks, you could just run that 3 times, and that will replace get rid of all the names in the tracks. So I'll be happy to expand on that a little bit as well. But let me know if that works for you, Alex. All right, Heartbreak Time Machine says, thank you for today's crash course on dB versus LUFS. All right, Joseph C., hello from Missouri. In FL Studio, the go-to EQ is Fruity EQ. What's Cubase's go-to EQ? So every channel in Cubase has a 4-band parametric EQ that's built in. We could have different shelving and parametric options. So this is widely used and highly regarded. If you wanted a more surgical EQ, if you go to the frequency plugin, this would give you 8 bands. Each of these bands could be stereo, mid-side, or left-right independent. There's dynamic control. These can be linear phase, so you could come over here and have a tremendous amount of control with up to 96 dB of cut for low pass and high pass filters. So check out, the built-in EQ is like what you would use an EQ for on a traditional mixing console. Very easy. And one of the great things, if you're working with the EQ, you could come over here and just say, the song is in the key of G. I could just come here and say, let's go to G4, and then you could set the frequency just by typing in the actual note. So you're like, oh, this song is in the key of E, so I probably want to EQ frequencies around E2. And then you could just adjust and find the frequencies in very kind of musical ways. And you could also just kind of right click here and say, I just want to invert that. So if you find kind of the annoying spot, you could just one mouse click invert that band of EQ as well. So either of those EQ plugins. And now with 13, there's also, if you wanted more, a different school of thought on EQ would also be like the Pultec EQs. So these are kind of classic Pultec style EQs where as you kind of boost a particular frequency, it not only boosts, but it cuts other frequencies. It was probably a design flaw in the original that so many people have come to love as well. So those are 3 different styles of EQs that are all great to work with inside of Cubase. And we're glad that you're checking out Cubase. Hope to see you on more future live streams. All right, Aunt O asks, hello Greg, would you kindly guide us through some of the basics of working in a logical editor? Okay, so the logical editor, we could think of it as a conditional editor. So I'll just go ahead and we will just put some notes in here. Okay, I'll just switch to a quick drum editor just to get some notes in quickly. Okay, so let's say we had we'll just look at it here quickly. Okay, so let's set up just this quick. Okay, so let's look at some of the stuff that we could do in the logical editor. All right, so the logical editor is a conditional editor. So what this means is we could set up different conditions and do kind of what's often referred to, if you talk about like a particular form of logic, and this could be very computer programming type of logic, as Boolean conditions. All right, so it's kind of, think of it as if this then that. So the first thing we want to do is to actually say we want to take we could choose to delete notes, to copy notes, extract to a different track, select, or change. So let's say we want to, I want to select all of my notes that are A sharp 1. Or I'll just make this F sharp 1 here, just in case we play it. Okay, so we want to choose our function. So we're going to say we want to select, and we have two areas. So we can say we want to select notes that are F sharp 1 or notes that are D1. So at this point, we could say for our condition, we want to say our filter condition, we want to select, and then we're going to choose type is equal to note. So now I could select all of the notes. But let's say I just want to select only my D1 notes. So here I could choose to kind of refine the particular search. So I could say, okay, I want to select notes that are, and we would say that have a subtype, and that would be, subtype would be pitch. And we're going to say is equal to D1. Okay, so now instead of selecting all the notes, I want to select notes that are set up to be on D1. So I'm not selecting the hi-hats, I'm not selecting the kicks. Now let's say as we do this, I have some notes that I want to select, notes that don't fall on beats 2 and 4 of D1. But we can see that when we do this, we have a note that falls right before the downbeat. So I don't want to select D1 notes only. So instead of selecting all the notes, I'm going to select all the notes that are on D1 that don't fall on beat 2 or 3, that fall into this time position. Okay, so when we go to this position, I'm going to now come over here. Let's add a third condition. So I want to now adjust the position. So we'll choose position. And then do I want this to be equal to a particular position? Do we want it to be inside a range, before the cursor, after the cursor, outside the cycle range? So I want to say we're going to select inside the bar range. And this gives us like a little picture what a measure looks like. So now I want to insert notes that are on the last 16th note of beat 4. So we now come over here and we could select only those particular notes. All right, so again, we could do more than just selecting these particular notes. So let's say when we look at the velocity of all of these notes, we can see the velocity of the snares are all exactly the same. So now we've chosen our filter condition to select those particular notes. But now what I want to do is to take those notes and I want to decrease the velocity by, let's say, 30. So now that I want to select something and change it, we're going to change our filter condition to transform. So what we're going to do now is we have this where we define at the top what we want to do something to, and this is how we want to change that. So let's say I want to now insert, and we're going to say our velocity, I want to decrease, we'll say subtract a value of 30. So now I'm going to take every D1 in this event, not every single note, just every D1 that falls on a velocity that is on D1 that is on the last 16th note of the measure, and I want to decrease its velocity by a value of 30. So we could just change that. So instead of, if you have 400 measures of music, we could set up these different conditions to tell what you want it to do, what you want to be affected, and then how you want this to be changed. So we could do, and we could set up incredibly powerful different functions between all these different multiple aspects and multiple conditions. So think of if this, then that. And that's a great way to kind of get started with the logical editor. It seems intimidating at first, but like when I first decided to learn it, right before I started working with Steinberg, like nearly 32 years ago now, I had a situation where I did a whole album. This is 1992, and we're using MIDI drums with live cymbals for tracking a rock band. We weren't in like a big, beautiful room. The drummer wasn't the best, but we wanted to have MIDI drums that were sequenced, recorded live with the band. But every time the drummer went to his ride cymbal, it actually sent a false trigger on the tom below. So instead of going through every single false trigger, I just said any note that's on F1, which was the tom that was being triggered, that has a velocity lower than 40, delete. So instead of having to do that manually, I could set up conditions and the logical editor could execute those types of very detailed editing very fast. So let me know if that's helpful. Okay, so we see Val just says, thanks, Greg. I tried it out and it seems to work, but I always have to have a sound loaded in Groove Agent. I'll play around with the guidelines he gave me. Thanks again, Greg. Yeah, so you get to have just a preset of just one simple sound. So it doesn't really matter what the sound is as long as it's outputting to trigger the sidechain. All right, always wonderful. See Razel from checking in from Denmark. Thanks for being online with us today. All right. All right, Roger Cabo asks, hey Greg, is it possible to visualize a compression effect on an audio waveform in real time while adjusting the compression settings? All right, so I think we could utilize the Supervision plugin for this. All right, so let's say, jump to this project. Okay, so let's say at this point we want to do all right, so I'm going to put the black valve compressor on. And let me get to the inserts here, and I'll just open up Supervision. All right, so let me just... And I think one of the metering options that we're going to have is the waveform. So let's see if we go to the wave scope. So as we do this, we could see the effect of the mix, and we could do this on, if we wanted to solo just individual tracks, so we could say without compression. And as we do this, we could actually just see the effect of the compression in real time. So we say, okay, I want to do this, and I want to change my output. So you can see kind of the dynamics, and you can see the effect of your plugins on the waveform, so you get a sense of what's going on as a visual representation. So let me know if that makes sense for you, Roger. All right, so we see structure D&B says, thanks for your help. That's just what I needed to know. I also want to sample sounds like from YouTube or movies. Could you show me how to sample a sound? Thank you. So it could really depend on your audio interface. So like, you know, one of the cool things we could do with, you know, your audio with the new URC software that was updated like in January, we could actually switch. So you could have one audio interface, and this could be specific to URCs. But what's kind of cool about this is you could change your master output here. So let's say I want to take my my UR24C streaming. Right. So now what I want to do is open up, let's say YouTube. All right. All right, so now...
Did you know that Cubase 13 ships with a full...
All right, so I'm going to come over here, and there's all sorts of like really complex scenarios for this, but I think if we just add, let's say, a track here, let's add an audio track and make it... And we're going to select our hardware input. So let's make this a stereo track, and then I'm going to say let's select our audio input from our streaming. I'll hit OK. So let's say this will be our YouTube. All right, so I'll place this into record. I'll go over to YouTube.
Orchestra included. It's called Iconica Sketch, and it sounds awesome. Today we're going to put it to the test, so let's write something epic. So first thing, we'll start with...
So basically I'm taking my audio interface and I'm splitting into like 3 different...
Then we'll use the bass strings to punctuate those staccatos.
So we'll come back, and now the audio from the device, so...
Orchestra included. It's called Iconica Sketch, and it sounds awesome. Today we're going to put it to the test, so let's write something epic. So first thing...
So that's how, like, if you have a URC interface, one of the beautiful things is that it basically can serve as like 3 different audio interfaces. One for the DAW that you hear, and then I could just set the audio output from my computer to go to the URC, and we could actually just do the edits directly here. So, and if you wanted to set your different levels, we could go to the streaming settings and be able to adjust and even add different effects. So it could really depend on your audio interface, but the URC is like a perfect solution for that, to have your streaming audio captured directly into Cubase with that. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, Everett Neal says, do you do individual paid training sessions? If so, how do you sign up for it? So I do these occasionally. Someone will ask and they'll beg me to do. I have done kind of individual consulting stuff, but I don't really want to promote it here. But you could always email. But I occasionally do them, but I don't think it's appropriate for me to promote it here on the live stream. So, but people have hired me to do stuff. All right, so we see from is it Moshi or Moski Marketing, says you mentioned you use different Cubase versions from 9 to 13, but once you open a project in 13 that's originally from 10, the file won't open up in 10, or am I wrong? So if you save a file in Cubase 13 that has specific Cubase 11, 12, or 13 aspects, you can, there might be a chance that it may not open up in version 10.5, but all you have to do is originally, when you open up the file, do a save as. You still have your Cubase 10.5 project, so the projects are still compatible. But if you add a significant number of features that aren't in the earlier versions, some of those it will do its best to try to translate everything. Maybe not everything will sound the same, but the file should open for the most part, depending on how many new features that you're doing. But when you first open it in 13, just simply do a save as, and then you're working on a different project. Your Cubase 10.5 project is basically working the same exact way as it was. It's not changed because you're moving forward on a different project file. But immediately opening it in 13 doesn't save it. All right, Septimius X asks, how do I delete missing MIDI imports no longer in use so that I do not get missing ports dialog when opening new projects? So this is another thing that was kind of introduced in 13, so you may not get as many messages. So what it could be, if you're still getting messages, is you may have a project that is set up where we have a MIDI input. So let's say we have an instrument track, and this instrument track is set to a particular MIDI input port, and then let's say that's not connected. Here, I'll just do a quick test. So we'll get a new project. And we'll create empty. Let's add an instrument track, and we want to set its input from, let's say, my Korg Nano control. So we have that. All right, and we will save as Septimius X. Okay, so now I'm going to close that project. I disconnected my Nano control. And let's open. Just get to my recent project, sorry. All right, so now it's saying, okay, we can't find that. So you could choose to remap it. But let's say now if I just choose this instead of my input being the missing nano control, that if I set it to all MIDI inputs and save, close the project again. Let's open and see if we get the message. So now we don't get the message because there's no reference to a missing MIDI input port. So you could just switch it to another device, and then when you save the project, those settings, those routings will be preserved. All right, DS Records asks, hey sir, I have a really important question. When I sample something, it's being sampled only by one sound of a specific note. But what I want to know is how to sample it in Cubase for each note. Okay. Sorry, let me just close an email pop up. Okay, so there's a couple different ways of approaching this. So if you want to do it with only stock plugins, so let's open up. So I'm gonna just, we'll start with, okay, I want to do samples of a Retrolog patch here. Okay, so I'll just open this up. Okay, so I'm just going to add different notes. Okay, so I'm going to add different tracks. Okay, and I want these all to be connected to Retrolog. Let's say I want to do 11. Okay, so I'm going to call this C, tab C, sharp, tab D slash E flat, E, F, F sharp. We'll just kind of name these chromatically. All right, so I'll just call this B. Okay. All right, so I'll just put this into record. All right, so let's say, all All right, so I made a little mistake there, so I'll just bounce that particular audio file. Okay, so now we have, let's say, a groove agent open. And not retrolog, sorry about that. All right, so now at this point we could just, let's see if we could even chromatically just drag these. Okay, so we'll start, let me just cut these pads because maybe I'll just kind of do this all at once. All right, so now each of these can just be, so you could just select the, once you kind of build, and I know people that will just build a MIDI file that will be each of these notes chromatically, and they'll just kind of record. And then if you wanted to, let's say where we have kind of the beginning and ends of all these files, like might be silence. Let's just select all of those files, go to your audio menu, and under advanced, we'll say detect silence, process. But you could kind of clean up the audio and just drag and drop it right into Groove Agent if you wanted to. If you have the full Groove Agent or the full Hallian, you could sidechain directly in and sample and capture the MIDI note assignment as you do it. So, but you give that a try. All right, so we see from Daniela Tocan, just says, can you repeat this, Greg, please, Friday again with the sonic example? So let me know what exactly you want me to repeat with the sonic example, and I'd be happy to show it. Or if you want to send an email to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so we see from Eduardo Diaz, hey Greg, been having issues exporting music XML out of Cubase. Track names don't export with the file. Any ideas? So I didn't get those to automatically carry over. So when I did it, and I know we did it in the previous live stream when you asked about it, so I don't know of a way to automatically have the track names carry over. So I'll play around with it some more, but I didn't find a way after doing some experimentation with it when we did it in a previous live stream. All right, so great to see Cubase X says, hi Greg, thanks for your stream, so you're welcome. It's great to see you back. We've missed you. Okay, so Daniela Tocan says in Vocal Synth V, the way to extract audio to MIDI, and then going on, I mean this Logic editor automation. So I don't know, I don't have a license of Vocal Synth V, so I'm not sure how that works with that. So All right, Cubase X says, had a question. A friend of mine who also uses Cubase had a way of only allowing the last .bak, the backup file. All other ones were not visible. This is fantastic, and I want this. So I think what you could do is in the preferences. So let's go under preferences to general. To when you get to auto save, is they probably just set the maximum backup files to 1 as opposed to 10. So that's probably what they did. So again, go to preferences to general to auto save, and then set the maximum number of backup values to 1 and see if that does a trick for you. Okay, so we see Witty Music was using the render and play. So yeah, it does carry over the track name. I'll play around with it some more to see if there's a way. All right, so we see DS Records. So yeah, right at the chat, like this time in the chat is 3:33 p.m. So you're not being ignored. We just answer all the questions chronologically. So it may take a little while for me to get to your particular question, as we have lots of questions, but I'm trying my best to catch up. So all right, so we see Michael Pierce sneaking back in. All right, so we see DS Records, just further clarification. So yeah, the Cubase sampler says I want to use the Cubase sampler, but not using only one sound. I want to use 7 sounds for each note to make it sound original and aesthetic, but not computer programmed. So again, if you wanted to, do more capabilities and kind of have it automatically done, the full versions of Groove Agent and Hallion will allow you to have very specific sampling workflows that aren't in the built-in tools, but what we showed just a minute ago should help. And within the Cubase, within Groove Agent 5, you have 32 different velocity layers. So. Okay, so we see Daniela Tokans checking out, watching the Germany versus Netherlands game. All right, so we see Joseph C. says, thanks for covering the EQ question. There's definitely a lot more to those in Cubase and FL Studio. I forgot to mention I have the paid Cubase 13 Pro, so great. Yeah, there's lots of wonderful EQ options. So wonderful to see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. Glad you can make it. Now, virtual ice cream will begin. All right, Uno Memento says, I heard we have something special on the Friday Zoom meetup. I don't want to rewind the video now. Can someone tell me briefly what to expect? So we're going to have a special guest, Chuck Ainlay, who's just one of the top engineers in the world. He's won 4 Grammys for his engineering. A surround sound pioneer, has worked with so many countries. He's based in Nashville. He's done a ton of country artists, George Strait, Willie Nelson, Reba McEntire, Taylor Swift, Peter Frampton, Mark Knopfler, Dire Straits, Ann Wilson, Bob Seger. I mean, he's done 300 records. So he's agreed to kind of come and say hi and meet everyone on Fridays. He'll be our guest. So Chuck Ainlay, Ainlay. You could Google him and go, wow, that guy's good. And just a really beautiful person. So looking forward to having Chuck meet everyone. And I have the Zoom set up already. So we're keeping it for kind of exclusive for the Club Cubase community. So. Great. Sorry, my chat field just jumped on me, so let me. All right, so we see Blake Cormier from the Awkward Situation says he loves Cubase. He's used it since 2002, so it's great. All right, so wonderful to see Pertti Komenen from Finland. Thanks for joining us today. We see Aunt O says, thank you so much. It helped. Thank you. You're welcome. All right, Michael Teams wants people to smash the like button. And if you haven't subscribed, make sure you do that as well. You can always leave nice comments. I have my review coming up, so you can leave nice comments in the field. All right, so we see Tron just says currently downloading Elements 13 update from 12 to my laptop. Loads new content in version 13. Happy to see Groove Agent SE5 included. Main DAW is still running Cubase 10 Pro, but will update once hardware and OS meet requirements. Yeah. All right, so Michael Teams has granted my family 1 gallon of fresh Texas blackberry ice cream. Sounds great. All right, so we see question, how to convert automation to clip gain. So I think that they're 2 separate entities, so I don't think that it's... but if you wanted it for being at this same level of, like pre-fader, like in a signal flow, let's take a look. I think we might be able to do something like that. So all right, so we can go over here to my MediaBay quickly. Okay, so let's say I have automation here. And, we do have a function in the channel called gain. So let me see if we could maybe copy. So I don't think it's going to visually copy it as clip gain on the event, like what we see with the blue lines. So I don't think it's going to do that. But let's say if we want to select these particular events, and let's copy. So I'm going to hold down Control or Command C. And I'm going to open the channel. And then we'll show the pre-gain automation track. Select that and paste. So now we could have the pre-gain. So let's come here. And once we have the read, I could blow this automation out and have the pre-gain automatically adjust based on that. So you could try that, but that's the only way I could think of kind of to have those values from the automation carry over. So, but Rosette to scale is kind of starts in the middle and could go up to 48.2 dB of gain or cut. But, the two are kind of separate, and because they're in separate stages of the gain structure as well. Okay. All right, just make sure I didn't miss any parts real quick. Okay. Just reading through different comments here. All right. All right. It's my son's bus time if he was home, or if he wasn't at home on spring break this week. Okay. Okay, so you see from Everett Neal, even when I turn off my monitors, record my audio track while singing to my MIDI tracks, when I play it back, my audio track still picks up the music from the MIDI tracks. How can I stop it? So if you could tell us like what audio interface you're using. So we often hear this from people that are using like a mixer that has a USB out, perhaps something like a Yamaha MG10XU, and they're playing back the sound from the computer, like the MIDI tracks or virtual instrument tracks, and they have the sound of that going out with the microphone, so that as you're monitoring the sound, that the sound coming in to the mixer is going straight back out and is being re-recorded in a loop. If you have an audio interface, it could be that you have a loopback mode enabled. So if you could tell us which audio interface, it could be that loopback is turned on and people use that for kind of capturing streaming or for doing gaming types of workflows where you want to, scream at people, while you're shooting them in like a, virtual play. So those types of scenarios, so I would say if you have a traditional audio interface that it's in a loopback mode, or if you have a mixer, make sure that the sound coming back from your DAW isn't going out. Again, it's usually just a little button so that it doesn't perpetually record the audio from the computer and mix that with your voice to re-record it. So if you could let us know what audio interface you're using, Everett, that would be helpful. Always so wonderful and always so great to have Sable Winters on from Bay Area. Thanks for joining us. All right, Cubase X says one backup file visible. Thanks. Maximum back files to 1. I'll try it out. Out of curiosity, is there a way to have 10 backups but only see 1? So they all, I know a lot of people have wanted a folder like a backups folder has been asked for many times. I've asked for it myself many times, and it hasn't materialized yet. Hopefully it'll be coming in the future so that the backups go into a dedicated folder so it could be easier to manage your project files. But I don't know of a way to have 10 backups and only see 1 other than manually creating your own backup folder. All right, so we see Best Korean Jesus says, had a question, but when identifying the problem, this solution presents itself. So I'm training everyone to be good diagnosticians for their Cubase setup. So, but it's wonderful to see you on, Best Korean Jesus. Sorry I couldn't help you. All right. See, Cubase X says that's some guest going to cancel other engagement. Yeah, so I think Chuck would be a special thing. So, and I helped him out in a couple of sessions last week, so I called in a favor for Chuck. So, but yeah, Chuck so that'll be a great one to attend. He's had a 40-year career, so and super nice, humble. everything you want in a cool rock star engineer to be. All right, so Nicholas Carlson says, I just upgraded to the 213 Pro. Looks and feels awesome, so it's great. Congratulations, and look forward to seeing you on more streams. All right, so you see John Costigan, just wondering if maybe he had his comment deleted, so just feel free to ask. Feel free to ask your question again, John. I'd be happy to answer. See, John says today he's been running up and down the stairs, doing drum programming upstairs and watching the stream downstairs. It's his main form of exercise. That's good. All right, so Everett Neal just says I use a UA Volt 276. So see if, Everett, if you have any form of loopback turned on. So it could be like within the control panel for the audio interface, but your audio generally shouldn't be, and check your input, to make sure that your input is set up correctly. So, but, generally if it's set up for a loopback, it would probably do what you're describing, but also just kind of check the routing and for your audio, but it really sounds like a loopback function so that it's recapturing what it's being sent out. And also if you're going from your UA Volt directly to speakers, or if it sounds like it's coming directly in, or if it sounds like it's being recorded in through the microphone, like if you adjust the microphone level, one thing you could check is, Everett, is if you adjust the microphone level all the way down, all the way up, does the background music get louder? Because it could be that depending on the headphones you're using, like some open back headphones sound really great and they're ideal for mixing, but for tracking, you hear a lot of noise coming out of the headphones. So sometimes people have headphones and they're capturing and they have the microphone, if you're using a condenser microphone, can be capturing the sound of coming out of the headphones depending upon the headphone type that you're using. So sometimes people use open back headphones for mixing and not tracking, and closed back headphones for tracking and not mixing. So thanks for letting us know your audio interface. So Best Green Jesus said, I found an old video Greg made a while back, so indeed Greg helped me. So that's good. Be 24/7. So Michael Pierce says, if Cubase calls in favors for us, what do we need to return to him in order to avoid a horse's head to wake up to? So Steinberg is always a good guy. Okay. All right, Darren Flake asks how to add vibrato tune effects to vocals in Cubase. All right, so I'm not sure if you want to add let's say if you wanted to add vibrato. So generally most of the tuning will actually be designed often to minimize vibrato. But let's jump back to this project here. We have some. Yeah, vibrato can always be fun with singers. In my college band, we had a girl who's a great singer, but very kind of Broadway-esque and would add that Broadway vibrato on every piece, every song she sang. And we used to tease her for it. And then, eventually she became Miss Saigon on Broadway. So she was probably the last one laughing at us. So her vibrato worked out well for her. So let's see if we want to add vibrato. Let's see if we could do that with a plugin of some kind. So I think that this might be, so while we're doing very audio editing, we can, as we come over here, we'll just, we could minimize the vibrato here, but it doesn't really allow us to kind of draw it in. But so if we wanted to, let's say we take these two notes and we minimize the vibrato here and we listen to it.
Oh, the day we first met, that was a long, long time ago.
All right, so we say we took the vibrato out on those two notes, and let's see if we wanted to add it back in. I think we might be able to through plugins. So let's maybe under modulation. Let's see if we go to maybe even a rotary. Try to vibrato plug in here.
Waiting on our yellow coach to ferry us home. You looked my way and your heart shone through. It caught my breath while you called me to. Well, even now I'm so in love with you, just like a long, long
So you could
time
use this kind of like a vibrato plug-in. Let's just dial it back a little bit here.
Oh, I remember the day that we wed. Seems like a long, long time ago. And our first kiss, there was no regret. Right after that Garth Brooks show.
So you could kind of put that in different spots and kind of tweak it a little bit if you need to add vibrato. Maybe approach it through a plug-in and see how that works. Nick brought up the coffee word. Come on, Nick. There's 26 minutes left. Come on, not fair. All right, so wonderful to see Jeff Zabelski. We've missed him from Chico, California. Great to see you back. Hope you're doing well and staying busy with your oboe performances. See, Michael Teams looks like he's giving me 5 mochas. That sounds good. All right, so let's go to a couple of questions that were mailed in. Thanks for all the great questions. If you've learned something new, make sure that you do hit the like button. Okay, so we had a question, how to make stems for easy project collaboration. Okay, so let's say I need to pass this off to someone who's going to play violin on it, and they have their own recording set up, and we want to send them all the different files so they could mix as they see fit. So I'm going to select, first let's create like the left and right locators around all of the parts so that we can, contain all of the different parts. So I'm going to select maybe the longest part and hit the letter P, like parts to locator, and this will set the left and right locators around the particular events. So here we're going to have some MIDI. We will have background vocals, bass, guitar, lead vocal, and we want to make these all equal length audio files that we could pass on to someone who's, maybe not smart enough to be running Cubase yet. So what we're going to do is go to your file menu. We'll choose to export audio mixdown. We're going to, if we wanted these to all be one particular file, we could select the stereo output, and that would give us a stereo mixdown. But what we want in this case is to have all of the individual files. So we're going to select multiple. I'm going to say we want our reverbs to be rendered. We want our virtual instrument of our piano, and I want all of my audio tracks. Now on the files, do I want to have, what processing do I want? Do I want to have my inserts and channel strip? Do I want it to be completely dry? Do I want my groups and sends? Or do I want, if I have master effects, do I include the master effects? So I'll just say inserts, I'll say groups and sends in this. And then after the export, I'm going to choose to create a new project. So what this is going to do, even though we have files that come in and out in different places, we want them to be, we'll call it Homer Simpson obvious, where all the files are going to start and end and be equal length. So you could start them all at the same time, hit play, and kind of have the sound of it. So as we work with this, we're going to come over here. We could choose a folder that we want this to go to. So let's say I'll just put it on my desktop for now. And we'll say export audio mixdown. And we could save this as one of, multiple different configurations for cues. So we could say, let's do this. Let's do an export as a 24-bit 192, as an MP3, as a 16-bit 44.1, as a 24-bit 48K, as all my stems with effects, my stems without effects, without master processing, without effects rendered. So we'll just take a minute here. All right. And this is so we can hand it off to someone else that's using other programs or maybe doesn't have the same plugins you have. And you've used a lot of the plugins, so we could render the effects and the sound of all those plugins directly into your particular file. And I probably should have selected a shorter part of the song here. I'm just going to abort this and do a shorter, just for demonstration's sake. All right, just make it shorter. So same exact process. I'll just choose a shorter length so that you don't have to wait 10 minutes for it to render. All right, so about 75% done. Okay, so now when we kind of jump over here, we could just play back and all of the range that we selected as we play.
School parking lot, waiting on our yellow coach to ferry us home.
And that's how you could make your stems of different files. So again, go over to, and you could put each one of those into different folders. But again, go to your file menu to export, go to audio mixdown, select multiple, select all the different elements you want to include. Choose your path where you want it to be saved to, and then if you needed to do different conditions, add it as a queue, and then just set up different conditions, add that to a queue. You could hit export and it'll go through and export all those different conditions and file paths so that they could all be done at once. All right, we had another question of how to change the color of the fader caps in the Cubase mix console. So someone thought it was a bug that they were all kind of set to white when previous ones had perhaps different colors depending on like effects channels or groups. So let's say we wanted to assign all these. Okay, so let's say we assign these to a group. So we look, and whereas previous versions, they were all set to different colors. So if we go to your preferences and we go to user interface, we'll say mix console fader colors. So we say effects channels, I want them to be more purple. And we can see that the fader caps have changed. When we go to group channels, we could just change the different fader types directly for here. So I think that these defaults have changed, but you know, some of the other design decisions in 13, you know, could be to alleviate that. But again, if you wanted to change the caps for MIDI versus instrument versus audio versus synth channel, groups, effects, input channels, output channels, you can just again come right over here to preferences, to user interface, to mix console folder colors. All right, so we had a question. When recording multiple drum mics on cycle recording, it creates different lanes for each take. Is there a way to group all the lanes of all drum tracks so I don't have to manipulate the file separately? Instead, I would like to be able to just manipulate one drum track and the same action, cutting, comping, etc. is done for the rest of the drum tracks. I'm on Cubase 11 Pro. Thanks for your help. All right, so let's set up this condition. And we'll do a couple of drum tracks. And some of this behavior changed in 13 from earlier versions. All right, so let's add like 4 audio tracks. Okay, and I'm going to put it into a single. We'll put it into a couple of tracks. I'm going to put different loops on, and we'll do several passes of this. So we'll hit record. So we'll say take 1, take 2, and basically what we want to do is a comp, but we want all these to be comped together. So we have this. And first thing we're going to do is, if we wanted to do like almost a multi-channel comp where the settings would all be carried over, at this point we want to select these. We're going to put them into we're going to add these into a folder, and on the folder we're going to enable group editing. So we can see that now I'm going to open up the lanes for this folder, and I'm going to do just say a comp on this. So let's say this is our take. I think if we open up the other lanes here, and not the automation, sorry. All right. So let's just go back. So I'm going to open up all of the different takes. And now that group editing is turned on and they're all visible, when I make an edit here, it's going to make an edit applied to all of the other takes for you. So this way, when we do a comp on one, those changes are automatically reflected on the other takes as well. So open them up so that they're visible, and then you can make changes in one and they're all applied, and you could choose to close the lanes for all the different tracks. All right, another question. Since Cubase Pro 12, my faders are jamming when I try to move them. I bought 13 Pro hoping it may have been fixed, but the same problem persists. Steinberg support has no answer either. I'm using 11 Pro for my sessions. Since that works perfectly, I have a video if you want to see it. Any help would be great. So generally, in the video that this customer had sent, the fader, when they tried to move it, was just constantly moving like this. So what I think the issue is that when we work with MIDI remotes, that perhaps a MIDI remote fader on a controller or keyboard was fighting with the fader here. So as we went to adjust, we would see that the MIDI fader would fight, and the controller was fighting against what was happening with moving the mouse. So I think that the MIDI remote could be taking over and having control. So make sure that if you go to like your MIDI remotes here and go to the setup, try to disable, go to the scripts and disable the script and see if that makes a difference. And this could also happen if we go to your studio menu and we go to the studio setup. And you could have MIDI communication issues here with the generic remote as well. So that this could be fighting, so either on a generic remote or Mackie control. So what it looked like to me was that, you know, when he goes to move it, that it's something is telling it to stay here instead, and the two were kind of conflicting with each other. So I think if you try eliminating all of your MIDI controllers, you could see if that resolves the issue for you. All right, question. I'm working with an engineer who is mixing on my system, is used to the workflow and other DAWs. Is there a way in Cubase to make the transport behave similar to other DAWs where, if possible, when you stop play, for the cursor to jump back to the previous start point? I always use the locators and loop for this, so it hasn't come up. But I was looking for transport controls in Cubase, and to me, there didn't seem to be an obvious, to me, way of doing this in Cubase. Thanks for your insights and advice. Okay, so this is kind of behaves depending on your version. There's two different areas for this. So when I hit start here and then I hit stop, we could have the cursor stop directly at that position at where we stopped it and stay there, or it could go back to our start point. In Cubase 13, in window 13, if we go to your transport menu, go to start, we could activate return to start position on stop. So when I hit play and then with the spacebar I hit stop, it goes directly back to where we were. In earlier versions of Cubase, 12 and earlier, we would go to preferences and go to your transport, and then there would be a return to start position on stop preference that was there, and that would change the behavior. But now what they did is they moved kind of the obscure location of the preference that everyone had learned and placed it in the transport in a more obvious place right here that's more accessible just from the start modes menu. All right, so we see question. Hello, Greg. With time, I had installed many plugins in Cubase to test in Cubase 13 Pro, which I do not really use. What is the best way to uninstall them and keep things clean? I'm running Sonoma 14.4. So one of the things that's a little annoying with Mac OS is that for some reason, there's not really an uninstaller with most programs. So a lot of times when you go into to remove a program, to uninstall a program, often what you would do is go to the, let's say we go to Finder, and then once you have a new Finder window, you could go to Applications and kind of drag the folder to the trash, and that often cleans up some things, but sometimes applications will leave different files in the background. So if you go to your Go menu in Mac OS, I think, and if you go to hold the Option key and go to Library, that you could come over here to, if it's plugins, so depending on if it has a lot of content, there may be uninstallers for content or a way to delete content. Like Steinberg has their library manager utility for that. But I think if we come here and go to audio, to plugins, to VST, but let's see if it's, but there is a VST plugin folder. That you could delete those, but check, it could be different for every plugin manufacturer. All right, let me jump back to our live questions. Thanks for all the great questions. Again, you could always email questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, great to see Jazzy Lamel on. Okay, Everett Neal just says, how can I set up two keyboards to work independently? So I have multiple, I guess it would be MIDI keyboard. So if you want that, you should see all of your available MIDI devices when let's say we add a particular MIDI track or instrument track. So a lot of times by default, you'll see all MIDI inputs. So if I wanted to take this track and play notes from my Nectar or from my Korg or other controllers, all those can be set into all MIDI inputs. But if I wanted to add, let's say, a MIDI track, and I wanted this to work only with my Nectar, and I wanted to add an instrument track, and this to only work from my Korg, that we could just set the independent MIDI inputs here so that when I play my Korg, it's not going to play anything on this track, and when I play my Nectar, it's not going to play anything on this track. So each track, instead of selecting all MIDI inputs, you could set a particular MIDI input port right there. Okay, so we see from Darren Flake, it says, sorry, Greg, I mean FX that affect the frequency LFO pulse, how to do it in Cubase. Let me just see if I could scroll back, refresh my memory. Okay, so how to add vibrato tune effects to vocals. Okay, so you see, so the frequency LFO pulse, how to do it. So if you wanted to do something with vocals along those lines, check out the FX modulator, and you'll find it under modulation. So here you could set up different LFOs. So you can say, okay, I want this to go to pitch. So you could say, okay, my pitch shifter, and you could have different LFOs that could be adjusted here if you wanted those to be based on eighth notes or quarter notes. So, experiment with the FX modulator with that, Darren. Let me know if that makes sense. All right, so we see Jeff Sabelski is going to upgrade to Cubase 13 next week, so that's great. I think you'll love the version. All right, always wonderful to see Graham Witcher from Royal Wooten Bassett. All right, so Jeff Sabelski says he's Smasher number 111. He's been unintentionally negligent. So we're glad that you made it back, and great to see you on the live stream. All right, so we have Bud Maynard says hello from San Francisco, back on for the first time in a while. Glad you can make it today. All right, kind words from Sable, just saying thanks, Greg and Jazz Dude. Your commitment and dedication are outstanding and very much appreciated. Thank you, Sable. Appreciate that. Okay. Okay, so I think we have about a minute or two left, and I think we are just out of questions. Thank you for all the great questions today. I hope that everyone has learned a new tip or trick. I appreciate everyone spending part of your morning, evening, afternoon learning more about Steinberg products. I feel so lucky to be a part of the community, helping people and having other people help people. And I just sincerely appreciate, that we're going strong after 4 years. Again, next Friday will be Chuck Ainlay, so one of the world's best recording engineers, and great insights. So again, that'll be our Zoom social meetup. We'll go for about 2 hours, and at that point we will migrate over to the Zoom social. So, and I do have a Zoom link. We're trying to keep it to Club Cubase attendees, just a nice perk for your loyalty to the live streams. So you can email me, and I'm happy to share that link with you. But again, we'll try to keep it for the live stream attendees. And we hope that everyone, again, has learned something new, something insightful to inspire their creativity. And we'll be back on Friday, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern. I think next week in April that we're kind of back in sync with our normal schedules with daylight saving times in other countries. So we look forward to everything kind of being back in sync next week, and we'll look forward to seeing everyone on Friday. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy, and we'll be back on Friday. Thank you so much. Goodbye.